welcome to another Polkadoodles video. So in today's one I'm showing you this really fun technique of using your embossing powders and then embedding some beautiful sparkly things into it as well whilst it's molten, and then heating again to help them sort of sink into the powder. And the way I was creating this was with this gorgeous stencil which is called the Sweet Circle Background Stencil and Mask, because you actually get the mask in here as well. And I actually flipped it around the opposite way to what's shown on the packaging too, just to show you that you can use it in both orientations. And then I was inking through the land area with some Twisted Citron and Rustic Wilderness, and then whilst that Oxide ink was still nice and juicy, I added my clear embossing powder onto it to kind of seal in the colour. And then that means once you clean your stencil and have heat set that layer, you can come back to it and apply a layer of clear sticky ink just by pressing your ink pad back over the stencil, and you're not going to get any of that green ink on your ink pad. And when you do your second layer, you use some ultra thick powder, and then when you melt it you get a beautiful molten effect in there that gives you a little bit of extra depth to your embossing, and then you can sprinkle in whatever you like. I've done this with spangles, you can do it with confettis, or this time I was using some holographic glitter bits in the colour Spring Fever just to add in a beautiful bit of sparkle to this as well. Then Nikki's stencil also has the sky portion in here, so you can actually put the sky back over the top. It didn't matter so much in this case because the first bit of inking was already protected by the embossing powder. But it gives you that lovely circular outside edge to have that extra stencil in here too. And then I've just added a bit of doodling. So actually before I added the doodling, I also used one of the stencils, I think it was number 2 out of this one, the Tiny Hearts 4 layering stencil set, which are 6x6 stencils, and you get 4 layers that build up this heart, but there's nothing to stop you using them individually as well. So I just used them so it kind of looks like it's a heart-shaped tree that has heart-shaped leaves that are blowing off of it. So I just added it a couple of times. You'll see in the video I kind of twisted it around and inked it again, just in the deepest colour I'd used for the sky. So the sky was Tumbled Glass and Broken China Oxides, so I used the Broken China Oxide to do the hearts in there. And then once I had done that, I decided to do a little bit of doodling on here as well, just some squiggly lines around the edge of the circle. I outlined the embossing on here. I put a little bit of outlining around my Dymo label sentiment as well, and also outlined a couple of those sort of heart-shaped leaves that are scattering off into the wind as well. So hope you like the look of that card. Stay tuned watching the rest of the video to see the exact process of how I made it, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!